The way we're living isn't working for everybody. A big problem in modern society is that we sit all day long, we eat all day long, we don't recover enough. And so our bodies are in a state of imbalance. The way that you treat yourself is really, really important for how your body responds to whatever you're trying to accomplish with your health.
Let's start with, how are mitochondria inherent or native to humans? How do they function? So let's maybe start with that.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing you need to know about mitochondria is that we inherited them through evolution as single cell organisms engulfed these bacteria. And they were essentially learning how to harness energy more effectively from the environment. So how do they harness the energy? They literally said, we're going to engulf these things and they're going to do work for us. We're going to create a symbiotic relationship. So endo means to sort of engulf, and then symbiotic means symbiosis. So over time, as we evolved from the ocean, and many thousands of millions of years later, we now are humans, and we're really a holobiome, which is a really interesting word, which means we have multiple sources of DNA in our body. We have our DNA, we have mitochondrial DNA, and we have bacterial DNA. And there's even viruses and fungal, right? So we're just this living system. But mitochondria are the power plants, but they're also the signal transducers and the general contractors of the cell. So they really decide not only how much energy to make, but where the energy should be directed to go. And the general programming of the body is, am I here alive? Can I survive? Do I have resources? Or am I at peace? Can I reproduce? Is there peace? Is this a good time to make more of me? So mitochondria, just like humans, they come together, they fuse, and then they break apart. So there's this thing called fusion and fission. And it's this cycle of energy, of turnover of mitochondria. And in that process of turnover, we literally examine which mitochondria are carrying a charge, and then we throw out the ones that don't carry a good charge. The batteries that no longer carry a charge, we got to get rid of those. So that's part of the reason why we need a good solid overnight fast. We need an occasional extended fast. And that's what initiates autophagy and mitophagy, which is throwing out the parts of the cell that are malfunctioning, like protein, that are just it's like a dirty kitchen. It's not easy to cook in a dirty kitchen. If there's a bunch of crap laying out on the counters, you got to clean that off before you can make a new meal. And so to get optimally functioning mitochondria, you have to have the right fuel in the body, and then you have to have the right signals sent to the body. And you also have to create the right conditions for the body to be able to thrive. And so the biggest sort of pillars of this book are based on optimizing metabolism, mastering the stress response, maintaining mobility. So movement is really key. And then making connection. So connection is really this really fundamental part of life that I didn't fully understand until I understood mitochondria. And I was like, oh, we can't just be in optimal health on our own, plugged into a community. We need to be part of an environment. We need to be part of families and friends and partners. And these relationships create the conditions where our nervous system can feel safe and feel protected and feel nourished. And also, when we come together with other people, we share information and resources. So it enhances your literal social capital. It can enhance your literal capital. And think about food and exercise. You learn so much about how to live by your conditioning of those who you spend your time with. That literally influences how you take care of yourself. So the connection piece is something that I think is really fundamental, and very overlooked by most people. And most biohackers are not biohacking their social lives. They're not biohacking their connection. They're not biohacking their communities. They're focusing on their individual bodies. And I do believe that's important. At the end of the day, you need to decide how to live your life. But what I've been really impressed by is just how much of an influence our relationships are to our health. And that's largely mediated through the stress response and oxytocin. So when we're isolated and alone, we increase our HPA axis tone, and we reduce our vagal tone, and that's not great. And then when we're connected and safe, and we actually improve our vagal tone, and we actually increase our oxytocin output, which is an anti-inflammatory, it's an antioxidant, it's mitoprotective, it's cardioprotective. So what I'm trying to kind of teach the world is we need to actually not only take the individualized approach, the personalized approach to optimizing health, but we also need to look at all of our environment around us and the people we spend our time with to see how that's affecting how we live. Because the biggest factor in long-term health and relationship quality oftentimes what I found in my clientele is that when people are not feeding themselves properly and not exercising properly, it's because there's stuff going on in their social life that's causing serious stress, either the work or the relationships. So I really take a holistic approach to health. And the mitochondria, believe it or not, they are like sort of this perfect example of how life and these patterns of existence are conserved on multiple levels, because they're just such wonderful, interesting parts of ourselves.
I love that. And in the book, you talk about your own, journey through medical school and how you weren't necessarily doing very well. And then you started changing your lifestyle, and people were like, what was going on? And it was, as I was reading through it, it was like, wow, I had almost the identical experience to you in that as I was going through chiropractic school, it was so intense. It was like, I was sitting all the time. It's like sitting in lectures and then sitting to study for the exams, and then isolating, like not really being involved in, the extracurricular activities or the opportunities that were available to me, and like gained weight, was very much depressed, really didn't enjoy, my schooling. And quite frankly, like my grades, as you had said, like grades also suffered as well. And I think that my journey, very similarly to yours, just touching on this community aspect, has been, I started off thinking, well, I need to change myself first. And now, as I feel like I really know what works for me. I know how to squat. I know how to deadlift. I know all the intricacies of my own mechanics. It's like, okay, I also need some friends. And I also need to have some, powerful women and men around me that are supportive and cheer me up and charge my batteries, charge the mitochondrial batteries, as you've been talking about. And I think it's a natural evolution. I had a conversation similar to this with Molly Galbraith maybe a year or two ago now, where she was talking about like we have to be okay sort of starting with ourselves first, but then also not forgetting the communal part of what it means to, she was talking about becoming a strong woman and like a strong girl. But I think that's the same lesson applies here, in that you can start with yourself and say, what are all the biohacking tools? How can I heal my hormones? How can I get into the intricacies of my metabolism so that I feel great, so that I have the energetic capacity to people, right? So that I can go out and be with other people and make these connections, so that and create these long lasting relationships. Did you find that was sort of the order for you as well? It was like self first and then community, or I feel like you're a bit more extroverted than I am. I tend to be a bit more shut down, which is something I'm working on. But
I mean, I think it's weird because, what's really strange is that, like, I think for my entire life, I've really overemphasized social connection in a lot of ways. I've always been a very social butterfly. But then medical school, I was really isolated, and I was really I didn't have a lot of friends. I honestly I saw it as like a stepping stone. I was like, I just need to get through this next 4 years, and then I can start my life,
My classmates were getting married with each other. Like everyone was marrying everyone. And I'm like, man, this is like, what am I missing out on? Yeah. I was the same way. I tend to be more of an introvert. Yeah.
I definitely found like my general romantic life was a little stunted by medical school. I didn't really start dating seriously until my 30s. And yet at the same time, like I definitely lived in the same hometown. I was like going to medical school in my hometown. So I knew my family. I actually spent a lot of time with them during medical school. And that was really supportive and helpful. And I'm really grateful to them for everything they've done for me. But when I moved to the Bay Area and for my residency, and for just generally because I wanted to live in the Bay Area, because I was like, this is where it's at. I literally moved there, and I chose my residency program specifically out of a desire to be around people that I knew and have friends. And so like I had been to Burning Man, and I'd met a bunch of people there, and they all like opened up their homes to me, and they threw parties for me, and they were like, you need to move here. And it was like this, it was definitely a choice of community over like caliber of school. Funnily enough, I ended up teaching at Stanford, which is funny because I didn't get into medical school at Stanford, but I taught in medical school at Stanford, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, I definitely spent, I'd say I think a lot of my life in the last 10 to 20 years has been about my own personal, with a realization, sort of without, honestly, not even fully conscious realization of just how important my community was to me. it was almost like this, it was very subconscious type of knowing. And then when I started studying and researching to teach at Stanford, I was like teaching about relationships. And I was like, wait, how did I miss this? This is like really important. Like, how did I not know that this was the thing that impacts health, like long term? At the same time, I think it was literally my friendships in the Bay and the influence of the people I was spending time with that led to me becoming who I am. Like when you spend time with people who are pushing the limits, who are living, like who are literally like like on the edge of innovation, it influences who you are, influences what's possible for you. So like, I really just, I think that the biohacking movement that started in the Bay was certainly an influence on me, like it was definitely a lot of my clientele were biohacking. And so I started made a name for myself as a doctor and an innovator. And what I noticed was that like a lot of the stuff that was working for men wasn't working for women the same way. And I was like, what the heck? Why are women and men so different? And I just realized that like over time, there was this knowing of like, oh, like we really like part of the reason why like I think medical school is so hard, specifically for women is actually there's more women going to medical school than ever and actually outnumbering men. But women are existing in a very masculine world, a very patriarchal world. And I'm not like a super woke, like mind virus person, but I definitely know that I live in a man's world. And the men's world is not designed like a women's cycle. So like one of the most challenging parts of being a female entrepreneur and a doctor is like, you don't get to really always take that week off that you need, like that, not off, but like that time you need during your menstrual period to like really reset and recuperate and relax, get that. And as a result, like it's really pretty easy for women to get burned out. It's really easy for women to get period dysfunction, for hormone dysfunction, HPA axis dysfunction, thyroid dysfunction, because we're just not built the same way as men. We're not built to be out and necessarily like working 24/7, 7 days a week, 30 days a month, 365 days a year. And yet women's responsibilities have gotten bigger. They're the breadwinners more and more often. They're raising children and taking care of the house. A lot of women are having kids alone without partners. And so we have a lot of stress on our bodies. And that stress, unfortunately, is going to disrupt your hormones. And it's if you don't manage it, if you don't master it. And like, I'm one of those people who like, even though I know a lot of what I teach in my book is important, I still have to remind myself, like, you need to recover. You need to use your recovery tools. You need to actually like do more restorative exercises. You need to ride your bike and do a little bit less, intense training when your body is telling you that it needs rest. And it's hard for us to listen to that voice because the outside world is telling us you need to do more, you need to achieve more, you need to be more. And frankly, like this last year, like I had a insanely busy year. And this was probably the one year of my life, I'd say, aside from like during my residency when I was really pretty one of the more stressful years of my life because I was building a company and launching a book and a course and moving to a new city and traveling to different cities. So it was like, it took a lot out of me this year, but because I know how to biohack and because I know how to course correct, like I was able to like take a really solid vacation and I came back feeling like really amazing. And we don't give ourselves enough time off. We don't give ourselves enough vacation time. Like most people don't take enough vacation time. And I think this like sort of great reset that's happening in our society and this sort of silent quitting movement is a consequence of everyone kind of realizing like the way we're living isn't working for everybody, and I do think that the world is shifting to be more egalitarian. And I think that women are becoming bigger leaders in the world. And if we're going to create a new, better, more stable, harmonious world, then we need to find a new way to work that works with our bodies and our rhythms. And that's what 2023 is about for me, frankly. And just more time with friends and family. And that's certainly a consequence of feeling a little bit like I got to take my own medicine, like I got to take my own medicine. And I've been doing that lately and it's been working really well.
It's amazing when even just the simple act of tracking your cycle You know, it's like maybe this week I'm not going to go for a PR, let's say, in the gym. Maybe I'm just going to, lighten up the weight, and I'm going to punch out higher reps. Even just that little tweak for me has been, I love that you're like, I have to take my own medicine, because I do the same thing. I'm like, you know what all of you need? You all need meditation. You know what you all need? It's like, and they always, I can't remember who said this, but whenever you sort of point the finger out, there's like 3 fingers pointing back at you, something like that.
Oh yeah.
So it is.
I did meditate today for about 20 minutes, and I went and rode my bike around the water here in Austin. And I have to say, the mood that it puts you in when you just like get that meditation time in, the movement in, a good solid shower, a little bit of food, like it just, I got sunlight in my face, and I came back from this trip being like, God, I'm so grateful for my life. I'm so lucky to be starting this year anew. And another thing a lot of women don't realize is that this inner voice, really specifically around stress, like we have an inner monkey mind, and that monkey mind is either reducing your stress or adding to your stress. And if that inner dialogue is consistently negative towards yourself or others, you will literally start manifesting that as your reality, because that is what your thoughts become things. And I'm so aware of my thoughts now. And I'm like, the more you meditate, the more you can hear your thoughts and hear your intuition and really listen to it. And so I've been like, trying to tune in more and more to what is my intuition telling me? And women have such powerful intuition. We just have to listen to it. And today my intuition was like, you know what? You don't really feel like weightlifting. You're on your period. Maybe go on a bike ride and get into flow. And I was singing on my bike ride, and I was riding around, and I was like, wow, there's not a lot of people out right now. It was like 8 a.m. or so. And I just felt so free, and it felt so in flow. And I was like, gosh, this is like such a great way to start the week. I just got back from Puerto Rico yesterday, and, I was just thinking on my bike ride, like we literally either make ourselves happy or sad, depending on how we think. And so watching your thoughts and really learning to like cancel the negative thoughts and really replace them with new positive things. Mindset is so fundamental to stress management. Like I'm heading into a very stressful month. I'm launching a book. I'm on a ton of podcasts. I've got meetings. I'm like finishing up to-do lists. I've got all these marketing relationships, all these brands. And I've just decided like, I'm going to have a great month. I'm going to have a month that's like, yes, it's stressful, but I'm going to like make the best of it, and I'm going to enjoy it. And like, that's a different mindset that I had in December, which was like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. And I just like, let it get to me over and over again. And it really did. And I think we need to like, we need to be more mindful of what we're thinking and feeling, so that we can really tune in to our bodies and our minds and like really sit with like, what do I need right now? Because a lot of women are very self-sacrificing, and a lot of moms out there that I'm sure are listening to this, or, women running companies are like, there's this sort of like general gist of, as women are just so used to being self-sacrificing, but we actually do need to put ourselves, we do need to put our face mask on first. And we do need to nourish our bodies and minds so that we can be our best.
So what are some, in the book, you outlined several signs of insufficient energy, which, coming back to this, mitochondrial efficiency and production, there was a couple of them that I just wanted to highlight, but I would like you to go through a list. But you talked about things like dull skin and lack of autofluorescence, which I'd love to touch on. And then the other one that you said, which I was like, oh, I didn't even put that together. But of course, is this idea of dulled senses. So like a dulled sense of smell, like a marked or a moderate loss of smell, where you can't smell anything unless it's kind of like right under your nose. Hearing, vision, taste, like all the senses. Talk us through what are some of the signs of insufficient energy, and then just kind of double click on those two, if you don't mind, because I loved those as qualifiers.
Sure. So if you think about your body like a big battery, and your mitochondria are like batteries, and your cell membranes are like batteries, literally energy is life. So what is energy? But it's literally a differential charge. It's polarity. Polarity is basically a big piece of the energetic puzzle. Some people could also consider energy to be like electron flow, or light is energy, and sound is energy. But in the body, when we have energy, we are literally creating an energetic charge, and it's through an electrochemical gradient. And that gradient is basically when you create electrochemical gradient, what you're doing is kind of like making like a hydroelectric dam, where if you think about water that's being pumped, or water that's like going, if you think about like when there's like water up here and water down here, and you're pouring water from top to bottom, it flows from high to low, right? And so there's essentially hydrogen turbine in the cell that's called ATPase, and it's that flow, that spinning of that turbine that creates a flow of hydrogen atoms that creates a differential charge between the two membranes, and that is what creates the battery. So you just have to understand that like polarity is life, and lack of polarity means that you wouldn't be alive. So when we have a nervous system, and it literally functions through transmitting action potentials. And if you don't have effective energy flow through your nervous system, then you're going to find your hearing is going to go down. You're going to find your smell is not going to be as sharp. You're going to find that your taste is not going to be as obvious. This is why COVID is really wreaked havoc on the nervous system, because COVID is a virus, and viruses go inside the cell sometimes, and then they hijack your metabolic machinery for their own purposes. They cause massive inflammation, and then inflammation causes destruction in the cell. And the mitochondria are actually they play a key role in the inflammasome. So when you go into the cell and you affect mitochondrial function, you get a brownout in the body. And that's part of the reason why we see the senses are dulled. And there's a lot of people getting paresthesias, like tingling nervous system issues. There's a lot of people getting anxiety post-COVID. There's a lot of people getting depression. There's a lot of people getting chronic fatigue. There's a lot of people getting brain fog, loss of smell and taste. And it's like, when everyone's trying to like, we don't know how COVID works. It's like, no, we actually do. It's a virus, and viruses hijack metabolism. And that's how they do their work. And that's how they propagate. Right. So when you think like when I got sick with COVID, my skin was sallow. I actually, it's so interesting. I went and did ozone therapy, and my blood was like very dark. It was like I was laying in bed for a few days, so it was not highly oxygenated. And when I got really well and happy and healthy, my blood, I saw it like a few months later when I was doing NAD therapy a month later. And I had like recharged my body through NAD therapy, through the NanoV device, through PEMF mats, through sleep, through hiking, through yoga, through healthy food. And I went from looking really dull skinned to being like beaming with light, like beaming, like my cells were charged. And it's funny because I just got this device in from this company my friend started called Ion Layer, and it's an NAD patch. And so a lot of people don't understand NAD and what it does, but it's basically a cofactor in metabolism that helps the mitochondrial function better. So it's really key for people to understand that like the way that you look and the way that your skin looks is a pretty good reflection of like how well your body's doing underneath the surface. And it's not a perfect reflection, but it is a good tool. Now, when people exercise, one of the things that you notice is that your skin will start to glow, and you tend to like have more light emitted. But just because you exercise doesn't necessarily mean you have healthy metabolism. Because I dated a guy once who was a bodybuilder, but he would drink lots and lots of sugar before he would work out to get that insulin. And he had prediabetes and he definitely looked physically buff, but he didn't have that bright glowing skin. And I showed him his, I was like, hey dude, like you need to watch out for the sugar intake that you're consuming. You're eating a lot of rice and it's not really working for your metabolism. So you can't just look at physical signs. You do need to look at some labs too, because some things can start looking like problematic way earlier before someone becomes, dysfunctional with metabolism. But generally speaking, if you go to China and go to Beijing airport on a layover, there's so much pollution in Beijing, and everyone's skin is like, it's honestly very gray and green honestly. And I'm not saying this as a racist thing. I was only in Beijing for 3 hours, but I was surprised at the bus that I took from one part of the air terminal to the other. And like you could literally see the pollution in the air. And I noticed that have a lot of pollution, my skin doesn't doesn't look as bright, doesn't look as beautiful. And another really important sign of energy issues is acne and wrinkles. So because you wrinkle means that it's a problem, because but premature wrinkling and premature and lots of acne in a fully grown adult, and also, like, I'm not going to say that this is necessary for everyone, but if you have premature gray hair, that is also a sign. And there's different age groups in the book that I meant of like who, like how old do you need to be to have premature gray hair? Like I have maybe one gray hair in my head and I'm 38, which is almost 39. And that's a pretty good signal that like my mitochondria are functioning really well, because like my sisters and my mom, like most of my family, they've got more gray than I do. And I've spent the last 10 years optimizing metabolic health. Now, is my metabolic health perfect? Absolutely not. Like when I'm stressed out, my blood sugar spikes. When I've got a lot of cortisol, and I had high cortisol this year, it gave me a little bit of insulin resistance. So like I am not perfect by any means, but the key to understanding biohacking is that you don't need to be perfect. You just need to take this data and change your lifestyle accordingly, and recognize that there's going to be times in your life that you're going to be spending more energy. There's times in your life that you're going to be building more energy. And sometimes when you got a lot of demands, that's when you spend some of the money in the bank. And then you got to rebuild that money. You got to rebuild that money supply. So fortunately, when I had COVID, I didn't lose my sense of smell or taste, which is awesome. But you know, I immediately went and biohacked a bunch of things that month, because I was like, there's no way I'm going to get chronic fatigue from this. Generally speaking, if you wake up in the morning and you're really, really tired and you can't get out of bed easily, it's a pretty good sign that you're not getting good rest. It's a pretty good sign that you probably have something going on with your sleep, or there could be high cortisol or low cortisol. So, you know, somebody who's burned out, somebody who has no energy, somebody who can't maintain their blood sugar or their blood pressure because their cortisol is extremely low, that is because they've burned out their mitochondria and they've burned out their cells. And I've burned out before multiple times in my life, and I'm not proud of it because it's been really hard to recover from burnout. But burnout is real. And people are like, burnout is a occupational condition. And I'm like, burnout is mitochondrial dysfunction as a result of literally like overloading your system with work for so long that you literally start wearing out the machinery of the cell, and you actually have to spend time rebuilding. So to me, you know, there's a bunch of different ways of thinking about energy deficiency. But, you know, if you have prediabetes, if you have insulin resistance, if you have diabetes, if you have hypertension, you have metabolic dysfunction. And so you've probably broken your mitochondria a little bit. And that's unfortunately the reality for at least 1 in 3 people in this country who have prediabetes. And so we've got an epidemic of this stuff. And my book is really about teaching people the fundamentals of like, what is health? And then what are ways you can measure it through devices like blood sugar monitoring, stress monitoring, HRV monitoring, movement monitoring, sleep monitoring, lab monitoring. And then also just intuitive monitoring, like taking a intuitive look into how you're living and you're feeling, and giving you an idea of like showing you like, this is how you think about health conceptually. And that's really what I'm aiming to help people do.
I think just to piggyback on the autofluorescence or the dull skin, I had COVID last, I think it was January, and I didn't want to cancel an interview that I had with Dr. Jamie Seaman. She's known as Fit and Fabulous online. And if you go to that video,
she's awesome.
My skin is gray. Like I'm literally like, because my people always comment like your skin. And yes, you know, to your point, you know, metabolism and training and stress management all contribute to healthy glowing skin. But that particular episode, my skin, I was ashen gray.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I need to put some highlighter, you know, like I need to like pump this up because I was flat. And even then with the highlighter, I looked gray. So let's talk a little bit about stress, because I think that there is, we've alluded to it a couple of times with, you know, burnout and women living in a world that is designed for men. And I would, you know, agree with you insofar as I think women really do need to understand how we are not small versions of men. We're not little men. Yeah. We have a different reproductive rhythm, at least in our years of fertility. But I also think that the word stress, like there's eustress and there's distress, right? And I love in the book, you talk about this idea, I was talking to you about this in the pre-chat, let's toggling these stressors, these mitohormetic stressors.
Yeah.
So I thought we might go through this because I was like, oh, I just love this framing. I love the framing of this. So talk to us about toggling stressors so that we are stressing the system out, but then there's an adaptive response. We've been talking about health as the ability to adapt appropriately to our internal and external environments. How might we toggle? And maybe we can list out some of the sort of push and pull, let's say, or push and press, however you'd like to categorize them. Some of the different stressors that we can do to develop some of this strength and resilience and grit.
Well, okay. So I met this guy, Ben Gibson, many years ago, and he became a mentor to me. And he has a biotech company all about mitochondrial health. And he's absolutely, some of the biggest influences of my life have not been doctors, have been people who weren't indoctrinated with modern medicine. And so they were able to go into the medical literature and design their own ways of thinking about the body and health, and then applying those themselves. And so Ben was this investment banker who basically went from being overweight and out of shape to being easily the fittest man I've ever met. Like big wave surfer, I'm talking 100-foot waves, and a yogi who can do the splits and literally balance on his hands and like do whatever he puts his mind to. And I spent a lot of time with him. He like mentored me a bit. And I was like, Ben, what do you mean I need to know about mitochondria? And he's like, look, everything about health is mitochondrial based. And so you really got to fundamentally understand this toggling of mitohormetic stressors, which is what creates the signaling to the cell to protect itself and to repair itself. And I was like, oh my God. So a big problem in modern society is that we sit all day long, we eat all day long, we don't recover enough. And so our bodies are in a state of imbalance because we are supposed to be going from stress to recovery, from exercise to rest, from light in the morning to dark at night, from eating to fasting. And these rhythms have been lost in modern lifestyles because we have food all the time. People eat until late at night. They get blue light in their face until late at night. I know many, many people who do not sleep properly because they are up late watching television or on their computers working. And they're like, but I do get my best work done at 3 a.m. in the morning. And I was like, I don't care when you work best. There's really not that many people in the world who need to be up that late. And hormesis is really this process of minor stressors make you stronger. So exercise, when you lift weights, it rips apart those muscles and you rebuild. But if you lift weights 7 days a week, like I've had one of my female clients who was a bodybuilder and she was starting to get hormone dysfunction, she's not getting recovery. I'm like, look, you cannot not repair those muscles. Like, otherwise you're just going to stress your system. And she just learned that she needed to take a little bit more time off, and she started losing weight, started getting the gains she wanted in the gym. And it was like, this is the fundamental programming of the body, because this is the programming that we adapted to live with in the savannah. So we still have primitive genetics in a modern world. And this mismatch is really why we're so sick. So if you want to get healthier than the average person, then getting some cardio, not a lot. I wouldn't do chronic cardio all day long. I did about an hour long bike ride today because I just felt like cardio, because I'd been like traveling yesterday. But generally speaking, I really recommend weightlifting for everyone. And then some cardiovascular training to keep that heart strong. And then recovery. Like, you need to get good rest at night. And then light in the first thing in the morning. Obviously Huberman, that's his like number one thing he recommends. But you need to signal to the cell that it's daytime, because that sends all sorts of messages to the body's organs that need to be turned on, that are synchronized through clock genes. And then there's other things you can do, which are kind of cool. Things like hypoxia, hyperoxia, which is another toggle. So free diving or breath work practices. Part of the reason why breath work feels so good is because you're literally sending the signal to the mitochondria to repair itself and to like function better. So breathing is one of the best things you can do. Improves vagal tone. I mean, I did the I love box breathing, 4 breaths in, 4 breaths hold, 4 breaths in, 4 seconds hold, 4 breaths out. Sorry, it's like 4 seconds in, four hold, 4 out. It's Andrew Weil's breath.
It's like
And
box.
then
It's like 4 up hold,
it's
4
like,
down hold.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a nice little box. And then yeah, so basically it's these back and forth. But fasting is one that really causes a lot of controversy, because a lot of people are just like, fasting is not good for you. And I'm like, look, fasting fixed my fasting glucose when I had borderline prediabetes, and if it wasn't for fasting, I wouldn't have got my blood sugar down from like upper 90s to lower 80s. And it was literally fasting that did that for me. But is it the only way to do that? No, absolutely not. But did it work for me? Yeah. Do I fast a lot now? No, I don't. I do maybe 12 to 14 hours, but I don't do as many long fasts because my body doesn't need to do as many long fasts.
Well, that's I think what you're saying there, if I can interrupt for a moment, is so fundamentally important. It's like the tool that you use to heal your metabolic dysfunction is not going to be the same application of the tool when you have healed. So you fasted longer when you had a blood glucose dysregulation, and now you don't need to apply that lever of length, let's say, or frequency or amplitude or whatever as often, because you are healthy. And that is where I think the controversy with fasting comes in, because someone's like, fasting is a great tool for weight loss, or fasting is a great tool for, insert outcome here. And then they just take it to the extreme and never change. You see that with keto. You see that with carnivore. You see that with veganism. Like you see it across the board, where it's like, it's this one thing and they go so hard on it, and they don't actually understand the nuance, which you just so beautifully explained, in that you do something for a short term, you ride the area under the curve, and then once you have healed, you have a different application of that tool.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the big pieces of the book around personalized nutrition. It's like we have these dietary dogmatic camps, and they're all warring against each other. And I'm just so tired of it. I'm like, is anyone else exhausted by the number of people on YouTube and Instagram who are just like bashing plants and vegetables? Like, I'm sorry, I'm over it. I'm so sorry. I'm over it. It's dumb. Yeah. And it's literally, it's also not sustainable as a society to put everybody on meat-based diets. And it's also just not great for the microbiome. And look, if being carnivore worked for you for your autoimmunity, awesome. And go for it. And if it feels good and you like it and you enjoy it and it makes you happy and it makes you feel like you're thriving, great. But just because I like to eat a salad is not something that I should be vilified for. Like, I love vegetables. I love making salads. I get so much joy of like putting random things into a bowl and putting dressing on it. And like, I love meat and I love vegetables. I'd say like a lot of my diet is very paleo. And at the same time, like, I sometimes veer off of it when I travel. Like, I ate a bunch of I guess plantains are technically paleo, but I definitely don't eat like normally a lot of rice. I don't normally eat a lot of beans, but I was in Puerto Rico and rice and beans are part of the culture. And so I ate them. And guess what?
I gained a few piece. That's the toggling piece, right? It's like keto and carbs, right? It's like push and then rest. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. And I also I was moving my body quite a lot. And, I really think that most people would benefit tremendously if they just looked at diets as like, let's try this on and let's see if this fits and let's see if this works. Because I've tried Mediterranean, I've tried vegan, vegetarian, keto, paleo, and I've sort of settled around Mediterranean paleo with like a Scandinavian bent because I love Scandinavian food. And sometimes I cook, but I love cooking food from all over the world. Like, I loved cooking Japanese food. I love cooking Ethiopian food. But we've kind of gotten to this point where, like, in America, people are just like so confused about nutrition that they have rigid rules. And it's like, look, if you have autoimmune conditions, if you have like a real health condition and you absolutely need to eliminate us for a total food group, that's totally reasonable. And I've been there when I had gut dysfunction and I had, and I didn't know I had celiac. I had to really spend a lot of time on a GAPS types diet, like a specific, a diet that was pretty restricted. And over time, as my body has healed, I've been able to eat dairy. I can eat more, I can eat more grains here and there. But I have found a sort of common medium of what works for me. And the pandemic really taught me that being dogmatic and being completely strict all the time actually makes me less fun to hang out with. It actually makes me less enjoyable as a person to make a dinner for, And so I didn't break all my rules, but I definitely bent to them a little bit, because I was like, if I'm going to try to reach millions of people to help them with their health, then trying to be this perfect image of health is actually just like it's not helpful for a lot of people, because like a lot of people are just like, I'm never going to be able to do that. I spent time in Peoria, Illinois, my hometown, and being healthy in the Midwest is not that easy. Like I had to basically learn to I had to go find the farmers markets. I had to go find the natural food stores. I had to go find the purveyors that had grass-fed meat. And it was like literally hunting and gathering. I even started foraging, and like, it was not an easy feat. And I was like, wow, I'm an expert in this stuff. Most people are not. So how do we get the vast majority of people to get healthier? We focus on the biggest things that will change your health, which is slowly phasing out a lot of packaged processed foods, slowly phasing out a lot of fast foods, and slowly phasing out the ultra processed crap that we know is causing problems for your health, and slowly phasing in whole foods. And then when you're on a whole food based diet, figuring out, okay, well, what macros feel best for my goals? What really feels best for my life? Like what really nourishes me? What makes me feel good? And
play with it.
Experimenting and play with it. And like going keto was really for me to get into a fast. If I hadn't gone keto for a month or two, I would not have been able to fast, because fasting I was metabolically inflexible. Mm-hmm. And metabolic inflexibility is when your cells are not able to gear shift, in fact. And that makes it hard for you to sort of go from fat to carb metabolism and back. And that's also what makes it hard for you to actually go into fat metabolism if you're trying to fast. So a lot of people try to fast and they end up breaking down because they're just like, oh my God, I can't do this. That's a lesson to be learned. That's just like, okay, maybe I need to like slowly work in some healthy fats into my body, and slowly work in like a more ketogenic diet, a little bit period of time, just so I can get my body back into the ability to break down my own fat. And, like all of this stuff is a lot easier, by the way, if you're not under enormous amounts of stress. So like the pandemic itself made a lot of the things that I typically biohack with really challenging, because when you're under enormous stress, your body literally craves stability. It craves regularity. It doesn't crave a lot of fasting. It doesn't crave a lot of ketosis. It craves like small meals and consistency over time. So I have found that like under the highest stress periods of my life, eating consistent meal times, eating more balanced macros is really what works for me. And then when I'm in more of a state of peace and calm, then I can go do the I can do the challenges. The biggest problem for women when they're trying to biohack, they're doing like cold plunge every day, HIIT training 5-6 days a week, and they're under eating. And why can't I lose weight? And it's like, well, your body is literally under a massive state of threat. And I put on maybe 5 pounds in the last few months, since maybe October or so. And it was literally stress related. And women need to recognize that like stress related weight gain is a protective mechanism that's an adaptive response. And as long as you don't let it continue and go out of control, sometimes it's actually helpful for your body to actually have a little bit of extra weight on it. And then when your body is in a state of relaxation and calm, it can let it go. I'm sure you've seen this with women like who really struggle with weight loss. Like we talked about this on the last podcast. It's like, you can't beat yourself up for your body protecting you, like you have to like self-love and like learning how to be really kind to yourself is also a really important lesson that I'm trying to teach in this book, which is the way that you treat yourself is really, really important for how your body responds to whatever you're trying to accomplish with your health. And it plays a really big role in whether or not a lot of biohacking tools are going to work for you or not. Because I've seen many times where women are like, I'm trying everything and nothing's working. And it's like, well, the one thing that you haven't tried is like recovery and reducing your stress and maybe giving yourself a little bit of a break, because there's a lot going on in your life right now, and that's okay. And like that sometimes is what you need, is to actually look at your body and look at your mind and be like, oh my God, look at what I'm doing for myself to survive this crazy world we're living in.
And I think for women as well, it's what I often see anyway is a woman who decides to fast or keto or weight train, or she's on some type of weight loss or hormonal balancing journey and she goes all in. It's a 10 out of 10 all the time. And so I love the idea of this like minimum effective dose. Like what's the smallest, like if a 10 out of 10 for you is working out, I don't know, 6 days a week, and one of those days is cardio or HIIT training, and then the other 4 or 5 or even less than that, maybe 4 days training, 2 days off, whatever it is. What is a 1 out of 10? What's the 1 look like? What's the 2 look like? And then kind of think about scaling up from there. What I think we do often as women is, because we live in this very, to your point prior, like living in a man's world where it is very much celebrated to go out and come back with the kill and go out with the accolades and the success and the setting the goals. We don't realize that we can be beginners, that we can start off slow and then kind of move from there. And this is where I often see a lot of menstrual, coming back to the menstrual cycle, as it always does on the show in some capacity. This is where we see a lot of menstrual cycle dysfunction. We are pretending like we don't have a reproductive system, or, with weight loss, we tend to be, let's say, if we're just looking at numbers, which I never think is a good metric, but if we're just looking at the scale, we're always a little bit lighter in the follicular phase, always a little bit heavier in the luteal phase. After a leg day, I gain like 4 or 5 pounds as well. So like,
Boom.
I think you need to, because my legs are swollen and they're inflamed and they're healing all the things. So I think that we also just have to recognize not only the daily, but the cyclical fluctuations that can happen over the course of a woman's cycle. So if you're thinking about weight loss, it's like directionally, is the scale moving in the right direction month over month, or like I kind of don't like to look at the scale no more than like, I measure like at around ovulation and then at around bleed week, and I kind of just continue there.
Yeah.
But I think that also understanding that there's all these other factors, sleep, as you mentioned, stress levels, as you mentioned, all these other things are going to contribute to a temporary, you're going to be holding more water in the luteal phase. And it's like, easy come, easy go, ladies. Like that stuff doesn't really matter. Like stop getting focused on the absolute number on the scale. And I actually, for my sort of orthorexic or type A type of clients, I like to actually shift it to more performance. Like you said today, I felt like, I'm on my bleed week. I didn't want to do weights. I wanted to go for a nice long bike ride today, and sort of intuitively felt like a longer bike ride today was good for, whatever you needed from travel and all of that. I also think, I would love for the women who are listening to this today to be able to have some sort of general plan, as you said, weights at the base of your exercise program, but be willing to kind of change and modulate the way that you train over the course of the cycle. I think that is very, very important. And a lot of women get that wrong, I think.
Yeah. It's funny because I went through my phone yesterday to pick out all these photos to do like a year in review for myself, like on my Instagram. Like, what did I do last year? Where did I go? What did my body look like? Because I find that actually photos of my body naked are more indicative of my fitness than my weight, the scale. Because the scale, like, and it doesn't really change the scale that much actually. But now, if I do gain fat, I do get curvier. I do have like, bigger butt and bigger breasts. But specifically, what I noticed over time was like, I could literally see that the months where I was the most stressed were I was like the most out of shape. And like my body was a lot softer. My body was a lot like I wasn't able to make it to the gym as much. And then when I was more stable, when things were more stable, things were more consistent, I would just fluctuate back. And I don't know about how many women are out there like me, but it's surprising just how quickly I can go in and out of shape. Like literally it takes me like a month of just not exercising to like lose a lot of my, like not too many my gains, but like I can go from pretty fit looking and strong and lean to like, it's pretty cool to see how your body is always changing. And I think that what's interesting is when I was younger, my mindset was like, if I just do all these things, then I will get this body and it will stick. And it's like, no, your body is always changing with the world around you. And we need to look at our bodies as this like beautiful thing that can take care of us and that can accomplish so many things. But like when you can develop a better relationship to fitness, to movement, to like and just be kind to yourself. Not everybody needs to be a bodybuilder. Although I definitely want a bodybuilding coach next year because I kind of want to I don't want to compete, but I want to see what I can do with my body next year. I'm really inspired by my friend Wade at BioOptimizers because he's just like in his 50s and he's doing bodybuilding competitions. And he's like, Molly, I'm literally out competing myself when I was 10 years ago. And I'm like so inspired by Alan Aragon and his wife. Like Alan didn't start doing a lot of his own. Like Alan got in like crazy shape later in life, really not rather than earlier in life. So I think a lot of women and men out there in their 40s, a lot of people like see themselves going downhill. And yet I have these people that I know and I'm like, wow, they are literally in the best shape of their lives and they're in their 50s. And I'm like, I want to be in the best shape of my life when I'm in my 40s and 50s, you know, like how cool is that to think that you can get stronger over time and fitter over time and leaner over time. And that just because you hit midlife, just because you hit 40 doesn't mean that it's all downhill from here. Like it can totally be uphill from here. I don't know if you've seen Train with Joan on
oh my
Instagram.
Gosh, I love her.
Holy crap, is she impressive?
Yeah. And she started late, like 60s or 70, 60 or 70 years old. Yeah.
I mean, wow, right? Like really, really cool woman. Like I showed her to my mom and my mom was a little bit annoyed with me because she was like, Molly. And I was like, but seriously, mom, like this is what I want my life to look like when I'm older. I want to be fucking Joan. I'm sorry to cuss, but I want to be in my 70s and be like, check out my muscle tone, you know? And the cool thing about women, which we don't talk enough about, is like, as we get older, our metabolism actually shifts because our hormones change. And so when we hit perimenopause and menopause, we see some changes to our insulin sensitivity, and we do naturally need to be a little bit more careful with carbs as we get older because we're not going to be as insulin sensitive. But I personally, I don't know about you, but I'm planning on going on hormones when I need to. And I'm like totally going the Suzanne Summers route, like full on hormone replacement. MRI, like I'm going to do like regular exams and you know, checking for breast cancer and whatnot. But like, I am so like interested in what I'm going to have to biohack in my menopausal years, like during perimenopause and menopause, like and postmenopause, like you're like literally different women. So there's so biohacking is this thing that's like, it's a lifelong pursuit, you know, like I haven't had kids yet, but if I do have children, that in itself, like fertility is a massive biohack. And I have a bunch of biohacking fertility tips in my book as well. That's definitely one of the things that I'm thinking about next is like freezing my eggs. I'm going to go to Mexico City, and that's in itself a massive biohacking thing. So what do I need to do to get ready to freeze my eggs? Well, I want to up my DHEA. I want to increase my acai intake. I want to increase my vitamin D, make sure I have proper vitamin D levels, make sure I get enough selenium, make sure that I, have balanced hormones, my cortisol is balanced, like looking at all these different factors, you know, make sure I don't consume a lot of soy. High amounts of soy can impair fertility. And just like really do all the things that I recommend in my book, like maybe not do as much partying with my friends, you know, like maybe not, I mean, I drink, but I definitely had some alcohol on my vacation. And I had like maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 drinks, but like if I'm going to try to get, you know, freeze my eggs, I'm not going to be drinking at all. Marijuana consumption, a lot of women don't know this, is actually not great for fertility. So there's a bunch of things that you can do to optimize different parts of your lifespan in this book specifically.
Yeah. And I share that vision with you in terms of getting better as I age. I have that it's a philosophy for my own personal growth, for my relationship as well. Like one of the things I think that we see tropes of is like, oh, you become roommates as you know, I mean, I'm engaged now. We'll be married later this year, but at the time of this recording and when this comes out, this is, you know, right now we're engaged. And
yay, congrats.
Thank you. Yeah. One of the things that often you hear is that, oh, like the love sort of dies and it sort of dulls and you become roommates. And it's like, screw that, guys. Like
screw that.
Yeah. I want
Screw
my
that.
love to get better and more passionate. And I want to be
that
able
is
to.
absolutely not. Yeah. That this is a thing that everyone says it has to be the life we live, but you were intentional and your partner is extremely intentional and you guys are like very fit biohacking people. A big piece of this book, a big part of the frontier of my personal career is, since I feel like I've like kind of figured out the whole metabolic health piece and I advise all these companies in metabolic health, it's like, that's great. I'm interested in how do we optimize connection? How do we optimize love? How do we optimize social relationships? How do we optimize sexuality? And so I'm actually working on a new sex therapy protocol, and it involves a fair amount of questions in the very beginning that you ask yourself to really identify like your attachment style, how you love, your sexual proclivities, your sexual dysfunctions. And then we have a very interesting sex therapy that is actually very modern, because almost all sex therapy is designed it's supposed to be designed to fix dysfunction, but we're designing this therapy to not only fix dysfunction, but to optimize sexual health. And specifically, we want to, like most sex therapies that exist, don't actually approach pleasure. So they focus on everything that's dysfunctional about the sexual life, but not about like how to improve pleasure. So we're actually including practices of how to enhance pleasure between partners, but also how to become more embodied sexually and how to take sexuality from just this friction-based in and out practice to a full body connection where your mind, your heart, and your genitals are connected to your partner. And so this connection is like fundamental to good sex, right? Polarity is really key to maintaining love long-term. One of the problems in long-term relationships is the mystery is gone, so the polarity drops. But I met these amazing two therapists in Austin who have this thing called sexy secure attachment. And they're really teaching couples how to basically ensure that the polarity has not dropped. Because like we need polarity to create charge. So how do we do that, right? So I'm working with multiple teams of people who are experts in their own right to not only triangulate like where has a person got a problem, how do they optimize their sexual function, and then how do they look at the love that they have and create both healing of attachment dysfunction if they have it, or enhancing of secure attachment, which is something that a lot of people don't realize is possible. And then how do you integrate your desire, your arousal, if you have sexual pain, if you have erectile dysfunction, if you have premature ejaculation, if you have disconnection with your communication with your partner, how do you integrate all of that and in practices on a daily basis that suit your needs as in your unique areas of optimization? So I'm basically creating what I did for metabolic health in this book for human connection. And then beyond that, after we're done with this specific project and we've popularized it and we built a platform around it, we taped everything, and we're going to start running retreats in April. The next thing I want to build is software for basically examining how do you measure and amplify social connection. So that's its own like separate project that'll come later, but that's a very long-term vision of like where we can go, because I really don't think enough people know how connected they are in the world, and then what does their connection look like compared to others. So just a little preview of what's to come. But Adamo Bioscience is this company I started last year, and it's really dedicated to measuring and amplifying connection. And so we started with sexuality and love and attachment, but then we're moving on to things like social connection, and then like there's certainly a lot more to be thinking about, right? So it's really exciting because it really is this like frontier of health that I think a lot of people are picking up on. And there's certainly science to it. It just hasn't made it out into medicine yet. It's just not made it into the world because it's very new science. It's like this is like new stuff that it's not part of modern medicine, but it will be.
Specifically also from a female-centric point of view, because I think that for a long time, a lot of sexuality, even just the way things are depicted, it's like, penetration is the only form of sex, let's say. And for a woman, or at least from the women that I've counseled, that I've spoken to, it can be hard to get into their bodies, right? Like we spend all this time cerebrally, thinking about, all the things that we need to do, living in the men's world. And then we have to surrender in another way, in another environment, and literally let someone else's body part enter our body. And it can be very difficult to surrender to that. And so my question for you, just around the sexual spark, which is a chapter in the book as well, is for women, and for a lot of women that I've spoken to, a big qualifier is safety. Like they want to feel safe. They want to feel like they can just completely melt, right? Completely surrender
and let go.
Yeah. How do we get close to that? How do we get better, let's say, at surrendering?
Okay. So it's funny because like when I was reading my book, there was like, I was getting to the parts on trauma. And I remember like, I was like recording my audiobook and I was just getting to the parts on trauma. And I definitely started to like get a little teary eyed because I was like, God, I've come so far in my personal journey. And like part of the reason why I wrote this book was for other women like me who want hope that it's possible that they can be embodied in their sexuality, because a lot of women have been traumatized. And it's like, we're only just now starting to really recognize how big of a problem this is. And a lot of men have too, by the way. Like I have multiple clients in my practice who've discovered that uncovered that they had sexual trauma as a child. And so it's not like it's just women, but it's definitely a problem in society. So 1 in 4 women are abused as children, 1 in 3 are assaulted, and 1 in 5 are raped. This is CDC data. And that means that about 60 to 80% of these women are going to have sexual dysfunction, and they're going to find it pretty hard to actually fully let go with a partner because their nervous system has been wired to protect them by either freezing or by tensing, getting so much tension in their genitals that they have pain. So sexual pain is a big issue, or they won't get aroused because their body doesn't feel safe. And so if you have a history of sexual trauma, you should know that you're not broken. Like you don't need to be fixed. Like your body literally did this for you to save you and protect you. You just, it is a process of having to reformat these memories around sexuality from unsafe to safe. And in my personal journey, it was an accident that happened because I had been with a partner, and we had experimented with MDMA. And this was before I was a doctor, it was before I had a license. So I think I can speak to this. I was in my late 20s, and I went from having and by the way, I'm not saying that every woman out there who has trauma should take MDMA and have sex by any means. That's absolutely not that's a 100% disclaimer. But I am saying that I accidentally healed trauma with a medicine that's being studied for PTSD, specifically because it's been found to actually cure PTSD in 67% of people who use it. But what was interesting in my personal case was I didn't know I had PTSD because I didn't have the symptoms. And so I actually looked at them up, and I was like, wait, do I have PTSD, or do I just have trauma?
Do I have medical student syndrome, or do I have PTSD?
I certainly feel like I have PTSD from medical school, but funny thing is that I found that my response to my sexual trauma in college was dissociation. So when I would have sex, I would dissociate. I would not really be in my body. I would be kind of watching everything happen, but not really in it. So it definitely took me a first waking up and realization of, oh my God, I'm not actually here with my partner at all. I'm in a totally different world. And I think a lot of women, when they're having sex, they're going into their heads, and they're going into and a lot of men too, by the way, will go into they'll go into another space. And really, when you're having sex with yourself, with a partner, it's kind of like you're masturbating with them. You're not actually with them if you're just in your mind. So a big, big, big piece is you have to learn to create emotional safety before physical intimacy. And that means that opening up about traumatic experiences you've had with a trusted partner who you know and trust. not turning to alcohol as your path for intimacy, because it will create the conditions for, there's all sorts of things that can go wrong with alcohol and sex. It's the most used aphrodisiac, but it certainly is a problem in a lot of cases. But like really actually going and getting real help for trauma is something that a lot of women who with sexual trauma don't do. A lot of them have just never gotten therapy. They've never gone to EMDR. They've never tried somatic experiencing. They've never done any of the basics.
Or just like you didn't realize that you had. You didn't recognize.
Yeah,
it.
I mean, the first step is like, do I have trauma? Do I have like a buried sexual trauma that's actually running malware in the background of my mind,
right,
keeping me from actually being in my body? And do I consider myself like fully, completely fixed and healed? No, I sometimes, when I'm under a lot of stress, sometimes I'll sit there and I'll just like go into my own world, and I'll just kind of like, I won't even hear people around me talking. I'll just be like in my own head, like having all sorts of like thoughts and conversations. And it's like, it's a mild form of dissociation, but like, it's a protective mechanism for, how we deal with things that are challenging, right? Like our body wants us to freeze a little bit and pause and take a step outside of what's going on and be like, okay, what am I doing here? Now, the key is like understanding the nervous system kind of behaves in two ways when it becomes dysregulated. So balanced nervous systems are going to not overreact, and they're not going to freeze and dissociate. They're going to just respond coherently to problems. When you have social injury, whether it's a major big T trauma or a little T trauma, what you will find is that typically people who get really stressed, or people who have overreactions, or people who have relationship problems and have a lot of conflict in their life, it's because they get triggered by things in their past that their nervous system is responding to as though it's still present. And that memory has not been integrated from the present to the past, from the implicit memory to the explicit memory, from the present memory to the long-term memory. And so if you see somebody who's like triggered and overreactive, pretty good chance that they've got some unresolved stuff in their past that they need to address. And then also when there are people out there that like really freeze up, go inward, isolate themselves, become shut down, avoidant, that's also another form of the nervous system responding to painful experiences. And it's like, it's trying to protect itself. So it's either attack, which is like fight, right? Or it's freeze, or it's, and sometimes it's tend to befriend, like sometimes like, there's the ventral vagal, which is like the way that we really want to be adapting is like really turning towards people and saying, hey, I need some support. I need some connection. I need some help. And when you build a strong community of friends and family around you, when shit hits the fan, you got people. Like one of my friends was suicidal earlier this year. And I came over to her house and I was like, hey, she's like, I'm going to go visit my parents. I'm like, hey, before you go, I want to see you. I want to sit and talk to you. I want to go through this with you and talk through it. And, like I've had to pull a few suicidal people off of a figurative ledge in this last year, because the world has been really hard for a lot of people. And unfortunately, like, I don't think anything's going to get easier in the next year. So the most important thing you can do right now for regulating your nervous system is to A, get proper therapy, find a good therapist, B, surround yourself with people you love and trust, and C, really get in tune with your history. Like do a little life review. I would recommend, astrologically speaking, to wait till like the mid to end of January to start doing resolutions. It's just not the time right now, because believe it or not, there's a bunch of reasons, but I'm planning on doing a bit of a life review. And like, if you haven't done a lot of personal development work, go to Hoffman, like go do a lot of these. If you haven't really dealt with your like relationship with your parents, it's still probably affecting you in this life. So doing a lot of the relational work and doing a lot of the trauma therapy and really learning how to become in tune with your body is a process that happens over time. And it's not going to happen overnight. So the first thing you need to figure out is like, what do I have any dysfunction? Do I have pain during penetration? Do I get wet and aroused before I have sex? Do I have desire to have sex at all? Do I have hyperactive desire to have sex? Is it out of proportion of normal sex drive? And do I feel connected to my partner emotionally? And if not, then these are areas of opportunity for you to work on your health, work on your sexual health, work on your and there are great experts out there that can help you. But ideally go find someone who you can get some referrals from, recommendations from. If you are LGBT, make sure that the person that you go see is LGBT friendly. And make sure that like you look at this as an opportunity for growth and not as like, I have a problem, I'm broken. Like 100% not going to help you if you think that you're not, you can't be fixed. Everybody can heal. I mean, it's totally possible, but you have to believe it's possible. And that's one of the biggest things I tell all my clients is like, if you don't think you can get better, you're not going to get better. But if you think you can, then you will.
Yeah, I do like that a lot, because I think that one of the potential downsides, let's say, of too much therapy is this adoption of this victim mentality. Well, this happened to me. My father did this. My mother did this. My ancestral lineage, this is how it was for them. And yes, all of those, we want to acknowledge those things and metabolize them in the best way that we can, not necessarily with the view to get over it, right? You mentioned, sometimes when you're overwhelmed, you just you catch yourself disassociating. It's actually just increasing or improving your own self-awareness and your own relationship with yourself. And again, coming back to that original definition of health, being able to appropriately respond, right? So yeah. It's like, maybe we don't get over the fact that we had a, big T trauma, little T trauma, whatever trauma in our past. Our parents were not the ideal, like I have children. My kids, I'm sure, are going to be talking about me in some therapist chair in 20 years from now in some way. And it's like your parents, for better or worse, were just doing the best that they could with the tools that they had. Like I've talked about my parents a little bit on the show, and sort of their kind of like old school, we'll say, old, like children should be seen and not heard kind of thing, which didn't bode well for a very chatty, strong-willed child. So I think that there's an acceptance and a forgiveness, maybe which MDMA has also afforded me, like this ability to not look at the world from like the first person singular, but like to look at everybody kind of like, well, mom was doing this because she had this going on, and dad was doing this because he had that going on, and then there was Stephanie like playing her little part in reproducing and re-triggering their old traumas, right? So I think that coming to a place of understanding and acceptance versus, and it's this like kind of toxic, well, we've been talking a little bit about male and female energy a little bit, this sort of almost toxic, like we have to get over it. We have to like slay it and kill it. It's like, well, maybe it's just like, it's going to be with you, and it's just going to have less of an edge over time. And you're going to be able to make peace with it. And you're going to be able to thank, for all the good, for all the shit, pardon my French, all the stuff that, it was, in all the ways that it harmed you. There were other things maybe that it helped you to become strong and independent and driven. And, there are other offshoots, let's say, that being exposed to an extreme stress sometimes, not always, but sometimes can have.
Exactly. I mean, I do think that ideally we would like to live in a world where there isn't these like horrible traumatic experiences, but more than ever, I've actually, just because I've met so many young people who have healed themselves from like 8 adverse childhood experiences by the time they were 22. Yeah. And I'm just like, wow, like there is so much more knowledge available to people today than ever before because of the internet. Like if you realize that like transformation is possible, and anything is possible with just commitment to like improvement, then anything can be biohacked, your sex life, your love life, your parenting, your fitness, your metabolism,
the way you look. Yeah.
The way you look.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have a whole nother podcast on beauty, but Yeah, I'd love to get your tips on how you stay so not youthful.
Well, you know what? When you next time you're in Toronto, which I think
Yeah.
is going to happen at some point this year, we
Yeah.
can maybe do an in-person podcast and we can talk about beauty because
Ooh.
I think that would be a lot of fun.
I think biohacking beauty would be a great topic to go on to next because there's so many cool tools in the toolbox.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of transference of skills. So all the things that you talk about in Spark Factor with healing your metabolism and going to the gym and lifting weights. And for me, I would say that parenting and lifting weights have probably been the two biggest personal growth, experiments, let's say, that I've ever engaged in. Like, raising children with, I think you have a new appreciation for like human potential and forgiveness.
Yeah.
And every time you think you have it figured out, they're like, oh yeah, here's the mirror, honey. Like, like you still got some work to do, mom. So I think that there's some beautiful personal development that comes from mothering and from raising children. And then the other thing is building a body, like you go to the gym when you don't feel like, you've ridden the motivation wave. Motivation is long gone. And you're like, yep, I got legs on the schedule today. I don't feel like doing it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I may modify it because I haven't slept well or I'm stressed or whatever, but I'm still going to honor the appointment with myself because I'm worth it. And this is, you were talking about, the body. I have come to view my body as a temple.
Yes.
However silly that sounds, but it's like,
it really is.
It's like, it's a place of reverence and a place of worship. It's like, yes, we have homes and we have Airbnbs and places that we live, but this is the place that we live every day. Yeah. Yeah. So it is something like, I go to, Stephanie Church 4 times a week, whether or not I feel like it. So that has been like a very big, because even when you don't, and it's like building a company, sometimes you don't want to show up to the meetings. Sometimes you have a difficult, employee or whatever. And you have to learn how to conflict resolve. You have to learn how to keep, do what you said you were going to do. And you have to follow through. As an entrepreneur, you know this very intimately. And I think the same is true with like physique building or building, hypertrophy of muscle, which is what, you mentioned most women should be focusing on, particularly, I'm 45 now. So like in my 40s. What? Yeah, just
no
turned 45.
Way.
Yeah, 45.
Holy crap, you are so inspiring. Yeah. I swear to God, I thought you were like my age or younger. I was like...
Emotionally, I'm an 8-year-old, but like chronologically, yes.
Yeah.
I'm 45.
Well, well done, Stephanie. Yeah. Well done. Holy crap, I had no idea. Like this is the truth. Like I really do personally, hate to say it out loud, but I really don't trust biohackers who don't look healthy. like if you don't look healthy, like now I'm not in like my best shape right now because of frankly just like fuck, it was hard. The end of this last year was hard to do it all. And I did so many things this year. I think I finally reached my I think I reached like the limit of what I think I can do in 1 year. Like I actually was like, okay, I think this might be your limit for stress. Like, I actually think that like, okay, I know what that I know what the like top of the sort of stress cup looks like. And it didn't completely overflow. Thank God I didn't burn out, but I definitely was like, this is not sustainable. And, the beauty of having all this data about my body in the last year was like, I was like, I'm so grateful that I spent all this energy currency on all these accomplishments. But I'm now like, who cares? Like the world's crazy. Like, yeah, it's great that I wrote a book and it's great that I fundraised for a company. And it's like cool and everything, but like, and I still care about all my projects, but I'm also like, I know for a fact that like fame and fortune is not going to bring me long-term health and happiness. It's actually just going to cause more stress and more problems. So I'm calling in like balance and harmony and connection. And like, that is like this year's theme is like all about just balance, harmony and connection and joy. And like, and last year's theme was not that. Last year's theme for me was like hustle, flow and go and don't stop and move and keep going. And it was like, and like, it was literally, I was like, what does the top of this mountain look like? And I got to this top of this mountain and I was like, whoa, that is really cool. I was literally in Antarctica. I was like, this is amazing. But I'm like, it's a little stressful. I don't know if I want to be this stressed out forever. Like, you know, so, I mean, we're heading into a recession. It's going to cause stress for the world. But I do think that, you know, I actually think that I will probably be more successful by like cutting back on the things that I do, like across the board. Like, you know, when you push yourself to this limit for so many months in a row, it's like there's just not a lot of room for other things aside from work. And like, you know, looking at you and looking at like women that I admire who have families, like you got to create space for that if you want that to enter your life, you know. And this last year there just wasn't space for that. So I'm certainly thinking about how do I create more room for more to emerge. So yeah.
Well, it's beautifully, like, you know, cyclically, it is very normal to be pushing sort of more masculine and then, you know, and then more feminine. Like, it sounds like this is a time for you to kind of lean into that sort of receive. I mean, you even use the word like, I'm calling it in, right? I'm going to call in the joy and I'm calling that in. That's what women do. I mean, just think about our, you know, I often talk about this with some of my healthcare practitioners, where it's like, you know, when a woman ovulates and she releases an egg, like the egg doesn't like run around and like, is the sperm here yet? Like, is it like up and down the fallopian tube? Like she just sits there like the queen and is like, I'm ready, right? You can come now. And then the sperm, you know, they like do their little thing. They go up and then they find, you know, they jockey to be able to penetrate the egg. And that's like feminine energy. It's like, I'm here, I'm ready for you now. All right. If you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Molly, you are definitely going to enjoy this next video right over here. So please enjoy and like and subscribe for more goodness.